As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a first-time visitor tonight. Daniel Smith is a real-time homesteader in Alabama. He runs the GoForGreenLiving YouTube channel. He's got an off-grid cabin with a 100-foot greenhouse, aquaponics system in Alabama with 400 thriving tilapia, and a thriving food supply system. He's a great guest here discussing aquaponics, preparedness, and going off-grid with a full solar setup. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I appreciate this.
We're connected to you through our mutual friend Brad Harris of FullSpectrumSurvival.com. Brad has been a guest recurring on our channel. We've also appeared on his channel talking about many different aspects of preparedness, survival, and self-reliance. And Brad has spoken quite highly of the homestead setup that you've got there, and how you have managed to not only develop for yourself quite a high level, extremely uncommon level of self-reliance and off-grid independence, but also how you educate others on how they can attain that as well. So we're delighted to have you here, and if you could just start us off by giving us a quick little understanding of how you got into this in the first place. It's a very unusual path, a life path for anyone to end up with such a setup as you've got. So if you could help us understand how that came to be.
Okay, I will. Actually, I was building houses in Georgia, and a traumatic event happened, and it was from the food that was being eaten. And I don't want to go in great detail about that, but I said the heck with this, and I just gave up, and I drove in my truck. I loaded up what I could in my truck with my camper, and I drove till I couldn't find a city anymore, and I started looking for a place to buy land, and I bought land, and that's how it kind of got started. But I've been on a path of self-reliance. Initially, I did without power for about 2 years, with no power whatsoever, and in 1996 there wasn't a lot of power to be had in solar. The biggest panels you could buy were 65 watts, and they were $450 each. So I ended up getting about 16 solar panels and staying there 9 years, totally off grid, with no YouTube to learn from. So it was just practice and failures, and just going along and just keep punching, keep going.
So you made the move from into this completely non-city environment as far as you could get from towns, and you got some land. And then what were some of the steps you took? You mentioned about solar power, and we'd like to find out a little bit more about that. But what about food? And you've now got quite a large aquaponics arrangement and greenhouse. What were your big steps that you took there, and how did you find your way there?
Well, I was reading the Mother Earth News, actually. That was the only outlet that I have, and they had an article about greenhouses. So I built a greenhouse, and I kept striving in the greenhouse, getting self-sufficient, and actually created a commercial business from that. And one day it was supporting the homestead with the commercial business of the greenhouse. And then one day again, I was like, well, what am I doing? I said, I could be growing all this food instead of having to go buy all this food. So I swapped it over and just started growing as much food as I could possibly do. And then I was like, well, how much food can I grow? I mean, because, you read these books, you read these articles that each person is supposed to take an acre to grow a garden for that one person sustaining for a year. And the new modern technologies and all that's got, the aquaponics and, growing vertically and all that, I was like, that's way outdated. So not only have I proven that you don't have to have an acre to grow, all that you need, I can, in my 100-foot greenhouse, can grow for about 25 people.
That's very high density food production you're doing there.
Yes. Well, and the tilapia, you say 400 thriving tilapia?
I was quoting Brad Harris on that one. I got to give him credit for that. So you go ahead and set us straight on what you've actually got going.
Oh, I do have about 400. I mean, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, something like that. But last year, we had like 4,000, and we eat them on a regular basis. So they produce and they produce and they produce, and we just eat them, and we share them and we sell them. So they actually are sustaining the homestead nowadays is through the selling of the tilapia and the vegetables. So
we've had a recurring guest, Joel Salatin from Polyface Farms in the Shenandoah Valley here on our show numerous times. He's talked to us about such things as vertical growing and also permaculture and some things about hydroponics, but you're doing it on a scale that, and he talks about this too, being able to do it in such a way that's so prolific that you can support not only your own family, but it can be a source of income, or you can be able to support others that you're in relationship with. Can you talk to us more about just some of the steps that you think that are practical that people can take if they want to get just a first start in? Let's just start with hydroponics for now, and then we'll talk about your greenhouse growing vegetables and that sort of thing as well, if you would, after that.
Okay. Now, aquaponics, I don't do a lot of hydroponics. I started out in hydroponics, but you have to buy the chemicals to do hydroponics, and I don't want to be dependent on anybody, so I changed over to aquaponics. And aquaponics is a self-sustaining system that supports itself. The fish thrive from the plants, and actually I've made some steps that the aquaponics is actually the fish are growing their own food, and I'm feeding them from what they're growing in the duckweed and the water lettuce and stuff. So it's a completely self-sustained system now, and plus all the food that I'm generating.
When you mentioned duckweed, I have to interrupt. When I was in junior high, I built a 55-gallon aquarium and a freshwater aquarium and populated it with all kinds of different fish I was fond of. And I also purchased in a small bag, just like you do fish from the pet store, I bought a little bit of duckweed to put on the surface because I thought that would look nice. They said, yeah, let's spread and fill in. And I had these 240-watt grow lamp bulbs right over the top of the aquarium, and it was just crazy the way that spread. The prolific spreading of the duckweed became a housekeeping problem for me. I was having to throw away so much of it. So my face just cracked into a smile when you mentioned about the self-sustaining ecosystem you got there. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, actually, I grow so much of it that I use it for compost now. So it actually doubles in every 2 days. So, you can imagine I have several large containers of it. I mean, now I feed, these are large 3-pound tilapia, so they eat a lot of it a day. But still, I'm throwing away like every 2 weeks a 5-gallon bucket, which I'm putting in the compost. So,
how do you maintain the water quality? And because with the tilapia, they got to have a lot of waste products, and some of that's going to be useful fertilizer for the aquatic plants. But doesn't it accumulate? Don't you worry about like nitrates building up or whatever in the water?
Well, actually, that's the different part about my self-sustaining system, because it works in a lake, right? So I added the grasses and put cinder. Do you know what a reed bed is?
Sure.
Okay. Well, should I explain?
Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah.
A reed bed is where the solids are put in through gravelly reeds, your canna lilies, your umbrella grasses and stuff, and the plants actually eat the solids, or they thrive on the solids and send out clean water out the other end. So that's what I'm doing now, and it's been working for over 5 years, and my nitrates never spike. I never get an ammonia spike. I never get a spike of any kind. If I do, then those water plants actually neutralize it and level out the spikes. So it's a totally new kind of aquaponic system. I mean, it's I tried to do it just like a pond or a river. A river would clean itself or something. So that's where I'm at.
You've got this sounds amazingly successful. Is your tilapia pond in the greenhouse, so it's out of the seasonal weather changing patterns, or how is that set up?
Yes, and actually I have several tanks, and I have 275-gallon IBCs along with another container that's about 400 gallons, and I'm actually adding on 2 more 275-gallon IBCs because it's fixing to be springtime and they're going to be reproducing, and those 400 adults will probably give me about 1,000 babies every month. So
is BC stand for breeding container or something? I don't know what IBC is.
IBC is it's one of those big plastic containers that it's the shape of a pallet, and they use in factories and stuff, and so that's what they are. It's just converted recycled material that I've used, and I also use 55-gallon drums that are cut in half, so that for my growing beds and stuff. My whole system is practically 100 feet long, and I have $200 plus in it. So that's it. So
wow, you've really done this on a budget. So in addition to your tilapia, you mentioned raising enough vegetables in there to feed, you said 25 people or something?
Well, not in the aquaponics alone.
No, in your greenhouse.
Yeah, in the greenhouse, yes.
Can you talk to us about what particular plants you've chosen to grow, and do you do that? Do you rotate anything on a seasonal basis, or how do you do that?
Well, actually, I grow in the ground, and I would suggest that to anybody that if they have a greenhouse, go ahead and try growing in the ground, because you grow it vertically, and you can grow so much in an area that is roughly, I do a lot of experiments because I really am trying to help, but in an area that's probably roughly 20 feet by 50 feet, I grew 375 tomato plants vertically. And that actually produced, you wouldn't believe what it produced, but 400 pounds of tomatoes every week for 3.5 months. So it was growing vertically, and when I cut off all the suckers, but I grow squashes there, pumpkins there. I grow everything vertically. Watermelons. I grew a 55-pound watermelon last year, so I was pretty proud of that.
It takes both heat and length of a season, but you can provide a lot better warmth inside a greenhouse than people can achieve outside, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, you could, and I have videos. You have to check out the videos, but butternut squash and cantaloupes and honeydews just hanging from strings in the greenhouse vertically, in an area that would normally just be, a 10 by 10 area would be for one cantaloupe, but in a 1 foot area is all I use, and I just send it straight up in the air. So and vertically is really the answer, and but it does, even growing vertically in the greenhouse, it doesn't compare to growing in the aquaponics. You get twice the growth, twice the production as you would in growing in the ground.
How's the soil there, and are you using the local soil in your in-ground, or did you have to create like raised beds or something with improved soil? You mentioned composting with your duckweed, etc., but can you talk to us about what you're doing to provide the medium that's in the ground there for your greenhouse plants?
Well, I use the soil that's there, and it's red clay, and it's not very plant, prolific. I mean, it doesn't want to grow anything. Yeah. So, and I use worm compost tea, worm casting tea, and that's what I water through the season.
Okay.
But in this time of year, right now, when I'm planting, I have a ground cover down. I pull back the ground cover, and I move the soil around just a little bit. I don't want to move it around a lot. And I'll usually add, like a cup or so or two of rabbit manure in those particular spots, and that's all I do to it. So it's just red clay and rock. And I show everybody. I say, they say, how do you grow like this? And I lift up the black the black wheat covering, and they say, "Oh, you're just growing in dirt." So it's not improved at all. It's just you can grow anywhere. You just got to give the plants what they need, and they get what they need in the compost tea. It's just
talk to us more about that, about your worm casting compost tea. That sounds like some magic elixir you got going there.
Okay, well, we grow worms here. I put them in aquaponics. They help eat the solids in the system too. So if one gets in the grow bed, they'll clean up that too, so it don't get anaerobic. So, but anyway, the worm the castings, I take them and put them in some kind of fine netting like pantyhose or something, and I have a 55-gallon drum set up on it's about 6 foot up in the air, and I dangle that in a 55-gallon drum of water and aerate that water, and then in 24 hours I also put 2 cups of molasses in there, so the bacteria in the compost eats the molasses and it grows prolifically. So what you're doing when you water with that, it's like putting 5 or 6 bags of compost on your plant each time you water with that, because that bacteria gets in there and it really gives your plant everything it needs, even though it's not getting it in the soil. So
interesting. So you are doing hydroponics. You just don't. You just aren't buying it. You're making it yourself.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Exactly. So
now you keep describing these remarkable, successful accomplishments. Either you've got this green thumb and a genius and a natural all together, or you had some mentoring, or we're only hearing about the successes and not the misfires. Can you talk to us about any hard lessons that you learned along the way?
Sure. This several times I've had crop failures. Last year I had corn crop failures completely. I didn't get a single ear of corn last year, and that left me with nothing for my chickens. And so I had to actually go buy my corn harvest, because last year was just a horrible year for trying to grow corn. And if you have a crop failure and if you're depending on something and something fails, then you could fail. So I had to supplement. So I'm trying not to use as much corn now. I grow chickweed, and they'll eat dried duckweed. The chickens will. So I'm trying alternative.
Okay. When our daughter's backyard chickens, and also our friend, we call him the guy next door on our channel where we've interviewed him, said that when you mow your grass, the greens, dark greens, are something that the chickens are quite greedy about. But sometimes after they've seen it over and over again, they'll get tired and they'll want something different. But the novelty is a big deal. It seems like they're naturally rotating or balancing their own dietary needs, but they show just ravenous interest in it if they haven't had access to real good fresh greens.
Yeah. Plus, I say that's a success about the tomato forest. When I grew that 375, 400. Can you imagine that? 400 pounds of tomatoes each week for 3.5 months. That was a failure, because inevitably me and my little girl were standing on the street trying to give away tomatoes because we could not store them. We dried 2,000 pounds of tomatoes that year, and and we canned all we could, all the jars we could. There just was nothing we could do with the rest of the tomatoes, so we were just having to give them away, and nobody wanted, I approached a commercial farmer one time and asked him, well, would you be interested in these tomatoes? He's like, oh yeah, I'll be interested. And he come out there, and then he only offered me $0.10 a piece for them, and I was like, well, I'd rather throw them in the compost for that.
Any other hard lessons besides the corn crop? Did you figure out what happened to the corn crop?
Well, the corn crop was the weather. It rained so much that the seeds rotted in the ground.
Sure.
And then I replanted them 3 times, and then finally, the third time that I planted them, it didn't rain for 4.5 months after that. So they got about a foot tall, and we every year we learn something new. You know what squash beetles are?
Yep.
And we learned that we need to battle the squash beetles. And last year we had another pest that come up here, a white butterfly-looking thing, and that bug wiped out our kale crop. And we depend on our kale. You know, we dry it, we make kale chips, we use it as a green, and they got maybe you know, you got to think my scale. They got 60 plants, and they just like in 2 days they had them eat down to nothing. You know, the little caterpillars on them. So that was devastating to me. So I had to get some natural as I could insecticide, and we used Dr. Bronner's soft suds, and we got neem oil. We mixed them together and made it very diluted and sprayed it on there, and it kind of I still had to catch the butterfly looking things and kill every one of them, but because they would go then, and this was like the horriblest pest. They would go and lay an egg on every single little leaf, so it would eat the. No, you just see the butterfly flying from leaf to leaf, laying an egg, and then that caterpillar would come and eat that.
We lost our greenhouse.
Yeah, and last year we had another tragedy. We lost our greenhouse plastic. A storm came through, and it was like a 100 mile an hour wind, and it got a big rip in there. And having a greenhouse that big was, you know, it's expensive.
Yeah.
And well, you know, there's a funny story. You know, we were talking when we first built the greenhouse. This was several years ago. Me and my wife Krista, we were trying to put on the plastic, and this plastic we did not hold back nothing. It was a $780 piece of plastic we were putting on there, and all of a sudden a freak summertime storm comes whipping up, and it actually was lifting me and Krista off the ground and ended up throwing her back some, and it ended up tearing. So needless to say, we got a cheaper piece of plastic next time. I mean, you know, we had to order next week. We had to order a cheaper piece, but you know, it's okay. It's just it's part of that. Like I said, it's just part of trial and error. It's figuring out, you know, being able to fight those little white butterflies. If they had not attacked me, you know, and something would have happened, you know, and I really needed that kale no matter what, I wouldn't have known what to do, or I wouldn't have been able to, you know, fight that. But now that I've had to fight that, you know, then and fight the squash bugs and fight, you know, different things. And what I found that that now I have a mass population of jumping spiders, and they kind of love the baby squash bugs. So I don't even worry about squash bugs anymore. And those little flying butterflies, they love them too. So that has kind of beat them out, so I don't have to use pesticides again. So I know, but I'm rambling. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Well, it sounds like one of the keys of wisdom that you've learned there is by having a diversity of many different parallel people. I mean, people talk about, you know, we have Jerry Robinson of Bankruptcy of Our Nation on our channel. He talked about 21 streams of income. And you talked about, well, we had a booming tilapia crop last year, and that, well, we lost all our kale or our corn or whatever. So by having a diversity of many different streams of crops and different types of crops, it sounds like it builds in some resilience for you, so that you can weather better certain types of, you know, partial failures here or partial failures over there without it completely setting you back to ground zero again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And every year I learn a little bit more, and I do feel like I have a green thumb, and my wife does have a green thumb, you know, and she gets me all the time. I mean, with with the aquaponics, she's like, I'm going to put this in aquaponics. I'm like, that ain't never going to work. But then we've grown sweet potatoes and, root crops that they say can't grow in there. We've grown horseradish in the aquaponics. I think it's because of the way my system is set up that we don't get the spikes and everything, that we can actually grow carrots and turnips and sweet potatoes in the aquaponics where everybody else, they can't.
Interesting. Well, we're short on time tonight, but it's been a quick and amazing introduction. There's so many areas we could delve further into, and I would love to. So if we could plan on having you back again and maybe take a little bit of a deeper dive into any of a number of different areas where people, if they want to find out more on their own from researching the education that you put out, where can they take the next step?
Well, they can go to my YouTube channel. I have 300 plus videos on, and they're all how-to videos. I'm trying to, I have a lot of failures. You said, you pointed that out. I'm good now, but I didn't before. I have a lot of failures, and I've learned from that, and I'm just trying to share so everybody else doesn't make the same mistakes I did. So.
Well, that's a great and generous place to offer so much of education for people. And again, the name of your YouTube channel and website?
It's GoForGreenLiving.
GoFor Green Living. We'll put it right underneath your headshot on the video that people are watching. We'll make sure we have the website spelled out there for them so they can get to it, and your YouTube channel.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. It certainly has been fun being here. So,
it's so great to talk to people who are really walking the walk and living the life and doing it. And just blessings to you and your wife and your family. And thank you for sharing your wit and wisdom here with us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Well, thank you for having me.